Welcome, welcome to all the beautiful souls out there in Australia, UK, and wherever you're listening or watching around the world. I am so delighted to have Mr. Jaymie Icke on the My Health podcast. How are you today?
I'm really good, thanks. Thanks for having me on. It's an honour.
The honour is all mine. We all absolutely love the Icke family and obviously we know your dad and Gareth and yourself very well, and we just feel that you're all absolute legends in what you're doing. We were talking just before we came on live that the hashtag of your business is "The Future is Iconic," and it certainly is iconic, and you guys are certainly needed at this time to pioneer this awakening movement. Do you want to have a talk, Jaymie, about what that hashtag means and what your mission is with Ickonic?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, the hashtag works on two levels. One, because the business and the platform is called Ickonic. And secondly, iconic obviously means memorable and something that you're never going to forget, and usually something good. And I think we need to believe that the future is going to be that, because if we look at the world today and the mainstream media and what they're peddling, the future looks very, very dark. And I refuse as a parent to two young boys to believe that that's their future. So I think it works on two levels in that respect. So the passion for me has always been communication, and it's always been the media, because I feel that if the media did their jobs properly and reported on facts as they are, no one was above the law, no one was above investigation and exposure if what they're doing is corrupt, then the world would be very different. Because you're always going to have people in the world that want power over, that are corrupt, that want to, take advantage of other people. But if the media did their job, those people wouldn't get to the positions of power, or if they did, they would be exposed within 5 minutes. And the ability to build an international criminal network, which is effectively what runs the world, wouldn't happen. It wouldn't have been able to happen. But as we all know, the media are incredibly complicit in the negativity and the darkness that we see in the world, because if they weren't, it wouldn't happen. So I've always felt that one of the key ways to change things was to start a media organization that did exactly what the mainstream should be doing, and that's report on facts as they are, investigate everything, no matter how unfeasible or how dark or how dangerous, even as the case has been for some investigative journalists over the years, no matter how any of those things it is, because if people need to hear about it, then we need to investigate it, and not have this very narrow band of, the accepted norm, and anything outside of it is dismissed as crazy, as we're seeing at the moment with anyone that questions lockdowns or vaccines or masks or anything like that. They're being flagged as crazy or conspiracy theorists or dangers. So that was the passion for me, was to start a platform built on integrity and built on a diversity of content that covers all the different subjects and spectrums that make up people's lives, whether that be your health, your spirituality, your news and current affairs, and your view of the world. That was the inspiration behind Ickonic, and we're still very young, but I truly believe that we've got a massive future, and will hopefully play a massive part in helping people see the world in a more positive way and taking back their own power rather than handing it away to other people.
Oh, it's incredible. And I believe it commenced in 2019 only, and the growth I can see viewing is just exponential already. So the future really is iconic there. And I want to thank you for the courage that you have in standing on the front line and speaking as an antidote to the mainstream media. But as you just mentioned, there's so much else involved in Ickonic. There's the wellness programs. You do certainly explore spirituality. You go into the paranormal, the deep woo-woo, and of course, having your dad I guess guiding you all this time. Have you always been interested in all concepts, Jaymie? Or are you more a black and white person, and you've come to understand more the supernatural? Who is Jaymie Icke? How are you kind of who were you when you were first born, and what were you first interested in, and how did you sort of come to be in this position now?
Well, I wanted to be a professional football player. and following my brothers and my dad's footsteps in that respect. And I was pretty good when I was younger. I was at Manchester United when I was 15, and I had an opportunity to probably make a career out of that, if I was honest, because what most people do when they're at that level, at that age, and they perhaps don't quite make it, they then would step down a level to one level below the top level, and so on, and generally work your way back up. I didn't do that. I kind of just went, this isn't for me then, and walked away. And I'm glad I did. I'm glad I had those experiences, because I had it drilled into me from a very young age to be disciplined, and if you want to achieve something, then to work hard from it. Every twice a week, on a Saturday and on a Saturday morning and on a Sunday, Dad would pick me up and we'd go football training after school, or we'd train in the morning on a Saturday, play a game on a Sunday, at sort of 12, 13, 14 years old, where most kids weren't doing that. And that taught me to work hard for something that you want, which is, giving me some great life skills in terms of, I can put them into what we're doing now, because it's not an easy gig. It's a tough slog to try and make this work. So when I was probably about 15 when I first started to really get an interest in the world, and in what was going on. I remember looking back. So I was born in 92, and I remember events like 9/11. I remember coming home from school, and my mum had it on the news and seeing what was going on. I'd have been 9 years old at the time, so not thinking much of it. What kind of was one of my catalysts? I remember being in school, in an assembly, and a teacher sort of addressing the room and saying about the 7/7 bombings in London, saying that this has just happened in London this morning. And obviously in those days, you didn't have mobile phones on you all the time, especially at that age. So you weren't communicating with kind of the outside world when you were at school. So none of us knew that had happened in the morning. And I remember obviously my dad writing about it and looking at it. And I remember getting involved and reading articles and trying to learn and seeing kind of the holes in that story. And that's what got me interested in the kind of conspiracy side of the 5 cents conspiracy side of, what the news reports on who's behind it isn't probably who's behind it. And that's kind of where it started. And I've started very much in the sort of 5 cents conspiracy, and then have looked more and more as I've got older into the spirituality side of it, the nature of reality, the paranormal, supernatural, and those kind of subjects. And I'm not as well versed in those as I'd like to be. I'm still looking at them at the moment and reading and learning and watching things. But that's what I say about, since we started Ickonic, I've had a great education, because we've sat in front of some of the greatest minds and done shows, and I've just been able to sit there and soak in all this knowledge, which has been, absolutely incredible. Going to sit and make a series in New Zealand, as we did last year with Dr. Robin Kelly, who talks about the holographic nature of the human body. Just sitting and listening to that for 3 days was amazing. But for me, I didn't really know what I wanted to do in my life until probably summer 2019, when this concept to start Ickonic really came into my mind. And then as soon as we started it, it was very much like, right, this is what I feel I'm here to do. I don't want to be on a stage. I don't really want a massive audience. I don't want people to know who I am. Like, this is the only interview I've done this year so far. That's not really my thing. I feel that my skills and attributes are very much in the organising, putting people together, connecting people, and building a team that can make great things. I think that's where my attributes lie. And one of the things that you could accuse the alternative of over the years is that the organisation of things has never been as good as the mainstream. They've always had that on us, and with the television side of it, their productions always look better. And it's easier when you've got millions of pounds like they have to put into their productions. But I've always felt we needed to bridge that gap. And that was the thought process behind starting the channel, was to have mainstream production standard with alternative information. So that was the main sort of thing behind starting the channel in the format that we have. But yeah, and for me, I was saying, for me, like, I was 25, 26 before I really decided, or really sort of felt, this is what I need to do with my life.
Yeah, and you've got that amazing program right now where you really do have it set up like a news anchor And it's just incredible, and how you're streaming people in. And you said at the moment you've got Graham Hood streaming in at the moment from Australia, Australian
Yep.
Connection today, who is the Qantas pilot. His video has gone viral. So you're really giving a platform to these amazing souls who are speaking from the heart, who are part of this mass awakening at the moment. So yeah, kudos to you and everything that you're doing. And did you yourself have a background in film and television? Is that something that you've had to learn, or you, because of those great organizational skills you have? I know you've got Richard as one of your friends, and he's doing video work and editing work. How does that all work behind the scenes with your team?
Well, for me, it kind of feels like every job I've had, every bit of experience I had before this was teaching me a different skill I needed to be able to do this. So obviously football taught you discipline, and it taught you to work hard, and you're going to have to fight to get what you want, in the sense of things are not always going to be easy, so don't give up. And then I started helping and running things for my dad when I was 23, organising all of his events around the world. So that was a massive undertaking in terms of, people think putting on an event is simple, but it's not, in the sense of, say just to put on an Australian tour like we did in 2016, you've got to think about all those theatres you've got to book, you've got to get them full, firstly, so you've got to market that, you've got to then arrange all of the visas, all of the insurances, get all of the equipment you need over there, flights, accommodation, all those logistics. You've got to manage a team. When you're sat in England, you've got to manage a team of people in each city to help you run, getting people in with the tickets and helping out, if there's any problems with people. You've got to get books over there. There's so much that happens just for one little thing. And that, to take on that kind of responsibility at 23 was quite daunting. But it also taught me, to stay calm under pressure, which is a massive part of doing anything. If you panic when you encounter a problem, invariably you don't think rationally and you don't fix the problem. So I think with an event, generally, if you have an issue, you have to fix it within 5 minutes. Otherwise, the event's, in massive trouble. Very few other areas, apart from television, are like that. If you've got a live broadcast and you've got a technical problem, you've got to sort it straight away. So those skills were very transferable. And then for me, I'm very much kind of, if someone asks me, do you know how to do that? And it's not something I've done before, I'll always say, no, but give me 10 minutes and I'll work it out. I'll figure it out. I'll always try my hand at anything, really. And I'd never picked up a camera to do anything more than, film a little family happy birthday song before midsummer 2019. I'd never done that before.
Wow.
But I sort of met the right people at the right time. Richard, you mentioned, I met that summer, and I'm actually going to see him this weekend. He had a little boy a couple of weeks after I had my first, and they've never met, so we're going to go and hang out this weekend over on the coast. And he's become a really, really close friend of mine. And had I not met him in the August, and him being able to help me and share the vision that I've got and Gareth has got, then maybe we wouldn't be here today. So I always think that everything has happened synchronistically as well, in terms of meeting the right people at the right time. So yeah, for me, it's just been trying and learning. And I said I can't remember the person that said the quote, but when they were asked, what's your best, it was a guitar maker, I think, who said, what's the best guitar you've made? And he said, my next one. And that's my attitude towards filmmaking. I've made 2 films. I've got another one we're making at the moment, which is coming out in November. And all, personally, as a film director, all I want to try and do is make each film better than the previous one, and learn from the mistakes and learn from the things you've done well, things you've not done well. And it's the same as running the channel. I think you can see, if you look at the content we made November 2019 when we started, to the content that we've just released in the last few weeks, the difference in quality is extraordinary.
I particularly love the movie 2040 that you've got on your channel. It really depicts what this 2 world split, or this bifurcation, will look like if that timeline happens to play out. We can't say at this particular time, but if it plays out, but it gives such a perfect vision of what utopia or what a healing new earth community can look like and what would go into that. And I feel that's so important for all of us so that we can add our frequency and add our visualizations to that. And I think this is the magic really of images coming to life via movies, but we need people like yourself putting that kind of content forward. Again, it's the antidote to Hollywood and all these other, other programming devices and rituals that are going on, hijacking our third eye and getting us to plug into something that is nefarious and that we don't want to create. And I guess for many people, it's really only been in 2020 where they've had that epiphany and that insight that they are being hijacked, that they are being programmed. But of course, your father has been teaching this for at least 30 years. Before we get into that, Jaymie, tell me what happened as the event organizer when your dad was told he couldn't come to Australia. I mean, you must have taken some really deep breaths at that point.
Yeah, that was interesting. That was interesting to say the least. I have one regret, which I'll tell you about. So we flew over to Los Angeles and then went down to Acapulco, Mexico, to a festival called Acapulco, which is like a consciousness, libertarian, anarchist type festival where David was speaking. And we went down for 7 days. Now, we only needed to be there for one, really, because he was speaking just on the one day. And right outside our room was one of the DJ booths, or his one right outside. One of my room was a floor up, his was a floor down. You had DJ booths. It was really loud. And I said to him, I said, well, why don't we? You've done the speech. Why don't we just go back to Los Angeles tomorrow, a couple of days early, and then go to Australia? I can move the flights and we'll go to Australia a couple of days earlier. Because we were due to come in to Melbourne 10 days before the first show. So I was like, gives you 12 days, pretty much 2 weeks to get over the flight, 15 hours, and rest. Anyway, we didn't. If we'd have done that, maybe we'd have got in. But anyway, we flew back to Los Angeles, and it was a nightmare trip the whole time. Really, we were on the runway at Mexico City, about to go back to LA, and they had to stop the flight because the temperature was so hot that the air was so thin, they needed less weight on the plane. So 16 people had to get off. Extraordinary, because Mexico City is surrounded by mountains, so they needed to get up quick enough. Then we went to LA, and we were sat in the hotel bar the next evening. Our flight was due 11 p.m. Qantas down to Melbourne. Might have been Graham as the pilot, you never know. And
Nothing was
and probably about 6 p.m. I reckon it was. We were sat in the hotel bar, bags around us, ready to get a taxi over to LAX to fly out. And I just checked my emails, and I saw the email with the visa cancellation. So we went straight to the airport anyway and spoke to the Qantas desk and says, right, can we move this flight to tomorrow? Which gave me some time to try and sort this. I phoned our PR agent in Australia and said, this is what's happened. Can we get David on the media like now, straight away? Which they did. And then they got him on a Channel 12 show, I believe, the next day. And then we just kept trying for 2 or 3 days to overturn. We got a lawyer involved, immigration lawyer. And then after 3 days, sat in a hotel, we decided to come back to the UK and try and fight it from here. And at that time, I can't pronounce his second name, but Milo from Breitbart had his visa cancelled as well to go to Australia. And the immigration lawyer we had managed to get his overturned. So we're thinking, great. I'd contacted all the theatres, rearranged the tour for the June, and this was the March it was originally meant to be. My wife's losing her mind because we're getting married in the August. She's like, you can't go away in June for 6 weeks. And then within a day or two, the Christchurch mosque shooting happened, and the immigration lawyer phoned us and said, well, Milo's visa's been cancelled again because he tweeted something about that shooting that had been flagged, and basically this isn't going to happen. They're not going to give anyone a visa now for the foreseeable future because of the anyone sort of contentious, they're not going to give a visa to. And there it was. That was the end, really. It was a shock, really, and it was quite disappointing personally as well, because we've had so many issues since 2016 with events and with venues cancelling late and so on. But I always managed to get it sorted, always managed to find a new venue, always managed to move something so that we could make it happen, even despite that. And this was the first time that, I know it wasn't my fault, it was the first time I felt I failed to not get this back on. And it just felt like a bit of a sucker punch in the sense. But yeah, that's that story. And we're here, but we now 2 years later, and I don't think we'll be going. I don't think we want to come to Australia anytime soon, but one day.
Come and play this, please.
One day we'll get there. Well, on my bucket list has always been to do an Ashes summer. I'm a massive cricket fan. It's always do a massive Ashes Christmas over in Australia, and I was going to go the year I met my wife before we met, because single guy, I was 23, thinking, yeah, I'll go down. Loads of Brits go over, and then I met Beth, and obviously it's not happened. So I'll have to wait now till the kids are older and take them with me. But we'll see.
When they finally let us out of this island prison that we're currently in, or let you in. Well, it's, thanks for sharing that with us, and to know that, of course, there is massive disappointment for you all. Everyone experiences emotions, and yeah, it's devastating for all the people that were waiting for that tour, but for you guys and all the work that goes into it, for that to happen, it's not right. But there's always a silver lining, and I guess on a higher level, it would have motivated you then and given you space then to do Ickonic, and to have something very solid and concrete where you're archiving everything all the time, so people have this one place to come across to, and to have your subscription, and to be able to log in and to watch and rewatch all the amazing content that you've got. And for me, once I joined Ickonic, I actually got rid of Netflix. I got rid of any mainstream TV, and I just thought, this is where I'm at. I'm just going to log on to Ickonic every night. So I encourage everyone who's listening to do the same. We do vote with our dollar, so it's really important that we're not giving our currency to these big platforms that are not acting in our best interest, that again are hijacking our third eye technology and programming us literally with images. I mean, the mind, or the subliminal mind, works in imagery, so we really need to be very cautious of what we're allowing to come in. And so I'm going to put a big command on everyone to go and jump on Ickonic. And in particular, I want to say thank you so much for having me on. And the reason also that we're doing this podcast today is that my series, Transcending the Matrix, Remembering Your Multidimensional Self, is launching today. So I feel so blessed to be featured there. And it is going to be one of those more woo-woo series where everyone, I saw a couple of comments on Instagram saying, what's she been smoking? And I'm like, I've been smoking the good stuff, baby. I'm on the Havana Gold. You got to get on it.
Yeah.
What's wrong with these people? Come on. But yeah, it is definitely a different concept, but I feel it fits with everything that you're doing. And I've learned so much, obviously, from all of you, but in particular your dad over the years. And he has this incredible ability to thread from science and great research, but also with that intuitive download and connection that he's got. And he's not afraid to talk about the paranormal. He's not afraid to discuss that we're an infinite point of consciousness and we're just having a brief experience here, and then we move on to other realms of consciousness. So my series really does address how we can perceive who we are in all 12 dimensions of consciousness and bring them in to this third dimensional experience. And it's time, I feel, that we started to join the dots really closely together. I've been teaching consciousness myself for, my business is 23 years old. So I'm a little bit older than you, Jaymie. But we've sort of stayed in our safe space within our own websites and doing our own trainings, and we've got a big network ourselves and international courses and these sorts of things. But for me in 2020, it was really about getting into the public arena in a greater way, starting this podcast, talking to people like yourself who are very switched on and very awakened, and not shying away anymore about who we are and what we do. And even if we're smoking the good stuff, it really doesn't matter what people perceive of us. And it's been a great lesson for me, because I was frightened of being trolled. And of course, I have been trolled very heavily in the last 18 months since we went more public with the work that we do. And remembering what the likes of yourself have been through, what they did cancelling that tour in Australia, what your dad has been through. He just inspires us all. Any truther on the planet will tell you that David Icke is the number one. And what an honor it is, obviously, to be part of the Ickonic platform. So can you discuss, do you remember, obviously you would have been pretty young, but do you remember your dad going through that phase where he was ridiculed for his beliefs? And I know there was a famous show that he was on where people were laughing at him, and you obviously know what went on. Do you remember it yourself? What's your perspective on it?
Well, he went on that Terry Wogan interview in '91, so I wasn't born when that happened. But I remember vaguely. I don't remember too much of obviously the early '90s. I was too little, but I remember obviously what school was like for myself. In terms of, that's kind of my earliest memories really of any sort of ridicule. But because I was around sort of football-related people, and he was coaching, and you didn't really see any of that outside of school. In terms of the mass ridicule, I didn't get to see too much of that, fortunately. I just had, obviously, what kids used to say to me at school, and obviously at that age, you're too young to kind of defend yourself or understand. Now you could, quite happily go back with facts and figures and make them look stupid, but at the time, you didn't have that. So for me, it was really when he started to use social media more, sort of in the mid 2000s, when Facebook and Twitter and stuff got really big. That you used to start to see comments and abuse and things like that. That was when it kind of became quite public for me. My brother and my sister, on the other hand, obviously were sort of, I think my brother would have been 10 when that Wogan interview happened. My sister would have been 16, I think, 16, 17. So they went through that a lot more than I did. I got away with it, really, in the sense of having to sort of have it head on. My sister used to get followed home from school and stuff like that by reporters, just to camp outside the house. I kind of missed that phase. Had fair share of stuff at school, which wasn't particularly pleasant. But as you were saying a minute ago, that fear of what other people think, that kind of gets that out of you at an early age, because especially when you're like a young lad, 10 to 15, peer pressure and fitting in is all you want to do, really. You just want to fit in. You don't want to stand out. You don't want to be different. But I was immediately different through nothing I'd personally done. And that kind of was tough in the moment. But looking back now, I think was really, really helpful. And it's given me that confidence to say what I think now. And I don't really care what anyone thinks of me anymore, to be honest. As long as I know, and my kids know, and my wife knows that whatever it is I'm saying or doing is for the right reason, then I can sleep at night.
Yeah, that's that courage of conviction, isn't it? True integrity, where you are a truth unto yourself and those who are closest to you, and the rest just falls away. It doesn't matter at all. Did you feel growing up that your father was a bit odd, or were you always fully on board with who he was and the teachings that he gave?
Well, I didn't really think about it as a young child, because he used to coach me at football, and that was kind of that was the relationship we had. We had a really close relationship, training every day or every other day, playing on a Sunday, and driving to games and that sort of thing. So we didn't really talk too much about the world. I remember when I'd have been, say, 11, 12, Channel 5 made a series with him, with David Icke, Was He Right, like a short documentary. And they filmed it over a weekend when I was at a football tournament in the south of England, and the crew were with us all weekend. That was kind of the first time I saw that side of things, having a film crew and people with you like that all the time for a sort of a good few weeks. They filmed my football matches, would film me and Dad chatting in the car, talking about things. So that was the first, 11, 12 years old was the first time I saw that side. But I never thought he was odd. And he never pushed any information on me. He always, if I asked him about something, he'd always talk to me about it. But he was very much, the world is what it is. You've got to find things out for yourself and make of it what you will. But don't believe, what your teachers say as by reflex action. Always think, always question everything. That was all I was really taught. And then once I got to like teenage years, I started asking more questions and wanting to learn more and more things. And was obviously going to the events in those days and so on. But no, I never thought he was odd. It was always just different.
Yeah. I can see my mum's just written a comment there. I'll put her comment up because my mum's a healer as well. So I was raised in that environment. And she'd always talk about being centered and her chakras, and she was doing affirmations. And there was something in me that was always so curious. It felt like language that I understood and I knew at a deeper level of my being. And it was only when I was older and I was having personal emotional trauma that it suddenly made sense to me. It became a working philosophy in my life. And I was so grateful to her for planting those seeds of wisdom. Even though I ultimately went off the rails when I was in my late teens, living in London. It was the UK. It did it to me, Jaymie. It's a wild place.
People from here, we go to Australia for gap years and never come home and go off the rails. So it's just an exchange.
That's it. That's it. You guys want to come here, and we want to go there. But yeah, it is a blessing to have awakened parents, and I know for so many people they don't, and so they're having to often counsel themselves or go on these deep dive investigations of what energy is, what consciousness is, and often feel very alone within it. So it is people like yourself and myself, I guess, because we've got that in our background, it's much easier then for us to go on to the foreground with our work and know that we've got that kind of rich history behind us, or that deep root system there to lend from, and that unconditional support as well, that we don't have parents that are saying, have you joined a cult? Although mum has asked me that. Mum has asked me that.
And also obviously I've never had a vaccine in my life, which is
right,
a big one that I'm extremely grateful for.
Wow.
Because most kids, obviously, you don't decide that for yourself. Decide when you get to an adult, but you don't decide that for yourself as a kid. So in terms of who your parents are, it's kind of a roll of the dice in that respect, whether that's going to happen or not. So I've always been eternally grateful for that. I'm 28. I've never had any kind of health issues.
Amazing.
So yeah, I've always been very grateful for that as well.
And what's the just to speak to everyone here that's listening from Australia, what's happening in the UK at the moment, and what's the atmosphere like? What's your kind of predictions for what's going to happen in the next few months?
Well, the atmosphere here is a strange one because life's relatively normal at the moment, in the sense of everything is open, football stadiums are full, theatres are full. There's everything. To do anything like that, you have to provide a negative test or show vaccines. But at the moment, you can just show a negative test. You don't have to be vaccinated. There was plans to introduce vaccine passports this month, which has been quite forcefully rejected by a lot of people, including some media organisations and MPs. And they've put that on the back burner for now. They've not cancelled it, and they will certainly still try and bring that in. They've probably just thought, the response for this is a bit too big right now. Let's sit on this a little bit longer. They've released what they're calling a winter plan A, plan B. They've done that this week, which is, plan's depending on cases being low, one's depending on being high. When they know, really it's going to be plan B, because they're going to mass test again. They're going to roll out the vaccine in schools. You're going to see, obviously, a lot of issues in response to that, and they know that there's going to be the cases they need to justify their more lockdowns and more restrictions, and then probably ultimately the passports which they've wanted the whole time. So the feeling like someone like me has at the moment, it is almost like that impending doom of the darkness of a horror film with heavy music, and you're waiting for someone to jump out. You're kind of waiting for something to happen. That's how I feel at the moment. Not that, you know, personally I've ever locked down. I've always just carried on as normal. Obviously, there's certain things you can't do because nothing's open. But in terms of, you know, staying in your house, I've never done anything like that. But I guess we're just kind of waiting to see how heavy the government want to come out with these restrictions, and then how we react to that. It kind of feels to me that they're trying to appease the protesters. These protest movements in London were getting really big, into the millions, and then all of a sudden the passports are dropped, and it kind of feels like they're trying to get people to step back a little bit and think, great, we've done our jobs, let's relax now, and then they'll bring them back in underhand, where people are not looking. So I very much suggest that nothing is changing, and that we're going to end up in another lockdown this winter. We're going to end up with more restrictions and more impositions put on the freedoms of those who don't choose to be vaccinated. And we're probably going to have quite a dark winter, I'd have thought, because one of the main issues that has been spoken about by scientists that are involved in this mRNA technology that's in these vaccines is that when you're re-exposed to a live virus, your body effectively attacks itself. So it does the opposite of what the science of a vaccine says it should do. So I think as we get back into the flu seasons, the pneumonia seasons, the other respiratory illnesses, you're going to see probably a lot of very sick people this winter. They'll obviously blame it on the unvaccinated, but that would be my prediction. I think we're going to have probably quite a dark winter. They're already warning about it. They're already kind of preparing people psychologically for the fact that the flu is going to be back this winter. They're never asking the question, well, where did it go for the last two? But they're just, you know, saying flu is going to be back this winter, and pneumonia is going to be higher than ever, and because of X, Y, and Z, we're going to have more problems. So I think we're going to have a pretty dark winter, but I think people need to be strong. That's the big key. I think this winter is going to be a real challenge for people to stay strong and to not give in to this, not give in to these impositions.
When you were part of those big rallies, those big freedom marches, what was the energy like there? Was there a sense that if this many people can come out onto the streets, that momentum will continue on and gather more energy as we roll along? And if the dark side, and I always see it as one stream of consciousness, I have to say, I don't really like to say dark side, light side. It's all us ultimately, but you know, in the third dimension, just to coin some of the terms I use in my series, in the third dimension, of course, we have to identify the characters in the game. So we're going to say the cabal, the cult, the tyranny of the government, the dark side, whatever we want to call that force. You know, what's going on there? Are people going to continue to stand up to that as they continue to play their hand? Because when we look at it energetically, the more the dark side plays its hand, the more awakening ultimately will occur. And is that how you perceive it?
Yeah, I mean, I see COVID as, you know, it's been, the last 2 years has been dark because a lot of people have lost a lot, but I think it's an opportunity, because what it's done is it's forced people to at least look at the world differently. Because, you know, take a massive event like 9/11, for example. 9/11 was a huge event that changed a lot, but it didn't change the lives of somebody going to work in Sydney tomorrow. Whereas this does. What's happening now literally affects everyone, whether you're black, white, rich, poor, gay, straight, whatever your, you know, the different fault lines that divide us, it affects everyone. So it's forced everyone to kind of reevaluate a little bit, even if, you know, they've just carried on and continued to listen to Sunrise and think they believe everything. But it's forced people to at least take a look. And I think, you know, you wouldn't have had marches with the numbers of people that we've had, and not just in the UK, but all around the world. You wouldn't have had that without this catalyzing event, effectively. And I think the protest, the energy is fantastic. The diversity of the people there, every age, gender, every walk of life you can possibly imagine is there. Some people just go to be around people that think similar to them. They might be the only one in their family. They might be the only one in office that thinks the way that we do and just wants to be surrounded by that. You know, I've spoken to people whose marriages have ended, whose families have blacklisted them, or they've had to walk away because they're not accepted, or they can't live how they want to live, because of, you know, how this has polarized and divided people. And I think one of the key points these protests do as well is it shows people that, you know, you're not the only one that thinks like this. And, you know, when you speak to most people on the street, very few that I've interacted with believe everything that the government is telling you. They're questioning something. Obviously, there's people that do and sit in the house and believe everything the mainstream media says is the truth. But there's probably the vast majority are somewhere in the middle, just going, what's going on? I don't understand what's happening, but I don't like it. And if it's clear to those people that there's actually tons and tons of people that think like you, our opportunity there is massive. That's why the media don't cover these protests, because the last thing they want is for people to see that actually these are big. These are not 5 people. You know, they'll put a story up, hundreds of anti-vaxxers turn up at the BBC, and you look at a picture and it's clearly thousands and thousands of people. But they're trying to, one, deflate the protesters, and also make it clear to people reading that story at home that might be leaning that way, that don't bother, it's only a few people. And that's where these protests, I think, have counteracted that. And despite, you know, the attempted censorship of them, the scale of them has got out there, and there has been images and videos and pictures out there that have shown that. So the energy there is just one of hope. And that's what I always say to people is, if you look at the mainstream and the way they're peddling this, there's no hope, there's no end in sight, there's no light at the end of the tunnel. Whereas with what we're saying actually there is. We need to get this corruption under control, get these people out of these positions of power, and reconnect people that actually care about people and care about the future with the people that are actually in power. And that's not going to happen. That's not going to happen currently. You know, we're not going to change anything by demanding Boris Johnson resigns and then everything changes, because whoever comes in beneath him will be of the same ilk. We've got to literally rip the system up and start again. And the only way that we do that is, you know, mass non-compliance and, you know, a lot more people starting to see through this. So I think these protests are not the end, but they're a starting point for that.
Yeah, it's incredibly exciting when you see it from that perspective, how the whole system potentially can collapse, and these cabal cult players will be shown in plain sight, and there's an opportunity to dismantle who has been running things from behind the shadows. So being part of the Icke family, did you predict this was coming, or was it still a shock for you when the cabal played their hand and put the whole world into lockdown in, well, for us, it was March 2020 here in Australia. It was, yeah.
Yeah, I think it was a bit of a shock.
Yeah.
I think I was a bit naive in the sense of I thought more people would realise before things got this bad. And then I've seen some people's reactions in the last couple of years where they're still not seeing it. And it's just bewildering to me how they're not seeing that. But yeah, I mean, they were always going to have to do something like this, because they knew that, you know, the longer that things continued at a snail's pace of them trying to get their agenda over the line, the more time that gave the alternative to get organised and expose it. Whereas this, you know, they've kind of run for the finish line. My dad uses the phrase they've done their finishing sprint on the back straight. So they've kind of gone for the line too early and they're going to burn out. And it looks like they're going to win, but they're not. And something I always say to people is this: when you get discontent and frustrated and you know, kind of deflated by it, is the people that are behind this, they own literally everything. They own all the land, they own all the media, they own all the food, all the resources, all the methods of communication that we have, all the information that we see and hear. Yet they're still terrified of people like us. Because if they weren't, they wouldn't censor. They wouldn't censor, you know.
Yeah.
Because,
and what is your perspective, Jaymie? I would love to know how you see that. I've got my own woo-woo concept on why that is, as supernatural beings, is our DNA coming online from a 2-stranded DNA technology moving into a 12-stranded DNA technology. But that's my speak. What I would love to hear your view on, why are the cult so scared of the everyday human?
Because I think they know the power and potential that an everyday human has, and that's why if you look at every faction of our society, it's designed to keep that suppressed. Whether it's the media that we watch that is just mind-numbing and just, you know, shows like, you know, Love Island and things like that that are just they're making stupid people famous effectively. You know, the food that we eat that suppresses our true nature, whether it be, you know, I have an opinion on vaccines, for example, and why they're given so early at birth, that that probably, you know, causes a disconnection between, you know, your spiritual self and your higher self at such a young age, and that disconnects. There's so many areas of the world that you look at, and it's designed to keep us low, keep us suppressed, keep us in a point of where you're not looking out. You know, most people have a fight now financially just to live, just to have a house, just to put food on the table. You know, you're at work 8, 9, 10, 12 hours a day just to pay the bills. You get home, you're tired, you just want to go to bed, and you get up tomorrow, you do the same thing. You're not looking around thinking, well, actually, what is this place I'm on? What is my purpose? What is the world? What is it more than this? Am I more than this? Because most people, life's a rat race, and it's a challenge, and it's a fight to get through it. So all of those things are completely by design. And they've given people very little choice and very little time to actually take a step back and look at the world and think, you know, what is this? You know, am I happy? Am I content? Am I doing what I should be doing? When, you know, if you think about whatever your philosophy is on life and life after death and life before conception and so on, if you believe, you know, this is the one chance we have to live and this is it, why would you want to spend most of it in a job where you're unhappy, or in a relationship where you're unhappy, or living in fear all the time? If this is your one and only time, and it could end at any point, you know, you could trip and fall and hit your head and knock yourself and hit yourself on a curb, and that's the end. Why would you live your life in fear? I don't understand. But I think that's where the media obviously played their job and you know, pushed out this fear-related agenda even before COVID. You never watched the news and felt empowered and felt better afterwards. You've always felt very small and insignificant. So that's why I think that they do all those things, because they know the potential of the human being, and the whole, you know, different spectrums of society are designed to stop us from ever realizing them. And when, you know, people like you speak about what you spoke about at the start of the question, it sounds crazy because no one's ever actually stood there and thought about it for longer than a kind of, yeah, that doesn't make any sense to me. Well, stop and think for a second. Compare that to this. When you stop and evaluate religion or science, well, that doesn't make any sense, but that's gospel to so many people. I think that's the main reason that they're terrified of us, because they know we have a lot more power and potential than they do. They're just designed to stop. They're just there to stop us ever realizing that.
We've only got to look at yourself, someone who's an empowered individual, and really you are a creator. Look at everything that you've already created. I can't believe that you're only 28 and you look great and you look young, but just your maturity and the courage of conviction and just your wisdom, and you know how you've so masterful in so many different areas. So if you're an example of what the everyday human, I say that in inverted commas, the everyday human can do, then wow. And so, as your dad always says, we're only operating out of a certain frequency bandwidth. If we step back and we see who we really are. Someone put up a great comment about playing the little I, or the little person. If we play that character, and even if we're just imagining we're doing it, it really doesn't matter, that we are that big I. We are the I am presence. We are, again, to theming it around, you know, your dad and all the work that you guys do. As he says, you know, we are all that ever has been, ever will be, and, you know, ever is. Like, we are so omnipotent. It's beyond all measure. It's beyond language. It's a frequency code that we all carry within us. We are the creator experiencing our own creation, and there really is no limitation. And so many people want to plug into victim consciousness and say, oh, that's okay for you, or that's all right for Jaymie, he's David Icke's son. No, it's got nothing to do with it. You are an empowered individual within your own right, and you're so incredibly clear to talk to. I can see just that amazing channel of energy that you're sitting in, and you know who you are. And I think the most beautiful thing, and I hear this so often, is that all the Icke boys have no ego. There's no ego about what any of you do. And it's very refreshing, actually, Jaymie, because there's a lot of truthers out there, and they all have wonderful high intentions. But of course, there's a lot of ego that goes with it, goes hand in hand with anyone who's, particularly at the moment, getting into the public arena, and people are sort of hanging on to every word that they're saying. But it's a testament to what culture that you're creating there at Ickonic, that there's certainly no ego. And if anyone could have a big ego, of course, it would be your dad. He could sit there like on his perch and say, I've led all these truthers all this time. They learned it from me. And he just, he does, and he's so humble, and he's always just got that special twinkle in his eye, like he knows something. he knows there's something great about to happen, which is really beautiful. And as we're coming to time, what's your vision for the future, Jaymie, for your children, for your beautiful wife, for Ickonic, for the world at large? What would you like to see happen?
I think I want to go to a world where we've never had before, which is where there's no crazy fault lines between people. We all operate on a basis of respect for each other. My kind of attitude is that everyone should be able to do whatever they want, as long as they don't impose it on other people. Whatever you want to believe, whatever you want to, who you want to date, whatever you want to look like, wherever you want to live, that's your choice. As long as you're not imposing that and causing imposition to somebody else by doing that, then that's your free will, and that's what it should be. I'd like to get to a point in the world where there's no one's living on the street, there's no conflict. And people just, like I say, interact with each other with that philosophy of we are all one, we are infinite consciousness. There's no division between people. And it sounds very kind of hippie and idealistic, but I really do think if you remove all those fault lines and you remove all those blockades that society puts on people and puts in between people, that's how people would naturally interact. And I'll use the example of a playground at a nursery. Kids don't see race or gender or anything like that. They all play with each other without even thinking. They just want to play. Yet, as we get older, we get all these things imprinted on us, which influence how we look at other people, how we interact with other people. Whether it be, well, I've got more money than you, so, not going to hang around with you, or you've got a different skin color to me, or, you fancy a different gender than all those things. Like, I'd love to go back to effectively kids not growing up in the sense of not having all those things that we have put on us. That ignorance of youth, that lack of fear that children have, the fact that they just want to have fun, they just want to get on with things, they don't get too invested in the tiny little details. I think we could learn a lot from children as adults, definitely. And, incorporate some of those traits a lot more. But I'd like to see a world where the people in charge actually care about the people they represent. That would be a great start. Where money worked for people rather than against people like it does now, where there wasn't not all this money spent on conflict and on different ways to murder people. There was less, you mentioned the word ego there. Ego is, the people, I'm surprised any of the people in charge of politics around the world can get into a room with the size of their egos. And it's all about power play. It's, my military is bigger than yours. Brilliant. I remember that in school when it was like, I'm going to get my brother on you because he's harder than your brother. I mean, have they even grown up past that scale? Clearly not. So that would be a big start, and also having people feel this connection with their spiritual self and what's above. Most people spend their whole lives never thinking about that. A lot of people that end up finding out they're terminally ill, for example, then turn to religion and things like that to probably try and make them feel that something is next. But What if, that those sort of things were taught in school? You're part of this massive ocean of consciousness, and you're a little part of it, but we're all one. What if that was taught in school? The whole education system would be completely different. Kids would grow up with completely different attitudes towards other people and to the world and to themselves, which would just change everything, pretty much overnight in one generation. So that would be a big thing. People understanding how food is our main medicine, and these processed crap foods can be completely got rid of, that are full of all these carcinogens and things like that. So yeah, a world of respect and a world of integrity, where everyone, interacts with each other how they would want the people to interact with them, which isn't the world that we have now. And I hope that Ickonic can play a massive role in that. I said to my wife when we started it that I won't consider this a success until we have 1 million subscribers. Which, if we're going to try and change the world and reach, to the four corners of the planet, then we need to do that. We need to get to at least that level.
At least, and you will, and beyond. I have no doubts whatsoever. So if you've got any questions for Jaymie, you can just pop them in now. There is a question that's come through, Jaymie.
Okay.
Is there a big movement toward alternative living arrangements in Britain?
Yeah, there's some. Yeah, there's certain groups that are starting to. So there's a grassroots activist group that started called A Stand in the Park, which is where there's lots of them around different areas of the country. Pretty much every town or city has one where like-minded people go and meet in a local park on a Sunday at 10 a.m. and chat about the world, exchange ideas, distribute. There's a newspaper here called The Light, which is like a grassroots activist-led paper. They'll go and distribute them to people. And some of those are looking at buying land and creating off-grid communities and things like that. So yeah, there's a move towards that. There's also a directory website that an activist group have started, which has lists of things like tradesmen, hairdressers, things like that, of people who are not vaccinated and are willing to work during lockdowns, and of that similar kind of ilk, and places that will never enforce vaccine passports if they come in. So it's kind of creating this community of people that all share the same philosophy. So yeah, the grassroots activism here has been really, really good from pretty much last summer when this all kicked off. So yeah, there is quite a few off-grid living projects. There's a few eco communities already that were here before all of this. So yeah, I think, as I mentioned at the start of the show, organisation has been a big thing that's let alternative sort of things down over the years, but people are really getting organised now, which is great to see. And this is one part of that, yeah.
It's definitely the positive side of what's happening, as the activation is immense in so many people. It's, where they may have been ideologies, it's becoming action now. People are taking those action steps.
Well, I think they're sensing urgency. That's why I think it's an urgency. Yeah. This is not a concept anymore. This is happening now.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, Jaymie, I want to thank you so much for giving your time so selflessly today. And as I said, particularly for the Australians, come on, guys, get on board with Ickonic. There's the website scrolling at the bottom. It's ickonic.com. There is a 7-day free trial offer, so it's absolutely fantastic. We are getting more questions coming in, but we'll probably, I will give you one more, Jaymie, if you don't mind.
That's fine, yeah.
Hi, Jaymie. I see England has reopened business and social events, unlike Australia. How has that been perceived among the people in general in the UK?
It kind of depends what your outlook on it is. So people that think like us realise that it's like a boiler that you need to release some pressure, and they've done that to release a bit of pressure, thinking that people will kind of back off from protesting. So that's definitely a factor in why they've done that. The other side of it is, the naivety of people that think this is normal now. When things on the 21st of June, I believe it was, that everything opened up again and the mask mandate was removed from being sort of mandatory. People think that's it. That's the sad thing. So as more restrictions come in again, a lot of people are going to be very shocked. But yeah, I think a lot of people that are kind of wary of the fact that the government have U-turned about 30 times in the last 2 years are just taking it with a pinch of salt. Every day as it comes, they'll come out and say something else tomorrow. And as I said, things are relatively normal now, but I think everyone knows it's not going to last. You know, the most naive of people probably think we're still going to have some kind of restrictions again through the winter. They're prepping us for that. The way it's kind of worked through the last couple of years in the UK is the press, the written press will say, oh, there's been a leak. The government, this is a leaked government sort of plan. And then another paper will say something else about a leak, which is different to the other one, about the same thing. So one will leak, oh, there's a plan for vaccine passports. Another leak will be, no, there's not. And they just gauge the public reaction and then think, well, which one can we get away with? So there's a lot of leaks at the moment about an October lockdown and things like that. So I think most people now are starting to see things like that and think, well, they're telling us what they're going to do then. So yeah, the mood's very much take each day as it comes.
Right. And this question, we'll wrap up with this one. How is the UK government treating mental health? Have you got any intel?
They're not. Mental health's been kind of a buzzword here in the UK for the last 3-4 years. We've got to do more about mental health. We've got to do more about suicide. We've got to do more about this. Yet through this, there's been no support for any vulnerable people. Suicide rates have massively skyrocketed. In, I think it's the US, close to 50% of kids under 18 have said they've considered suicide at some point in the last 18 months. So no, there's absolutely nothing that's being done to counteract that. You know, people are not getting appointments they need to speak to people. You know, there's very little to prevent isolation. You know, kids are having classes online. University students are having everything online where you're not interacting with people. And if you're a type of insular person who doesn't, you know, isn't a very sociable person, forcing yourself to be in a social environment is probably good for you generally. Whereas if you're sat at home now on a computer and you're not getting any of that, that's only going to add to that isolation and loneliness that you feel. So yeah, nothing's being done about it. It's just being talked about, but nothing actually is being done.
And this again is why we need to really ramp it up when it comes to individual spirituality and individual consciousness, because if people do have to be at home and are isolated, well, what a perfect opportunity to dive within and get to know yourself and who you truly are beyond the third dimension. I'm going to weave that back into the concepts of my series, which is on Ickonic, launching today. It's called Transcending the Matrix, Remembering Your Multidimensional Self. It is a remembering process. We're simply putting the disowned aspects of self back together, reawakening to the truth of who we are, lifting the veil of spiritual amnesia. And it can come often in a blinding flash. It's like, oh, that's right, I'm back. That's who I am. And as we've spoken about and themed about today, you know, we are all creators experiencing our own creation. And so for everyone watching and listening, please take your inspiration from someone like Jaymie, who is, wow, just pioneer, paving the way. And what a time to be on the planet, Jaymie. You're at that perfect age where you've got a long career ahead of you, but you've got nous and you're mature already for a young man. And to be CEO of Ickonic, it's absolutely powerful. So thank you for all the incredible work that you're doing on behalf of the collective. And thanks to everyone who's been listening and watching. This will be going over to Spotify and iTunes. So if you know anyone who isn't necessarily on Facebook or YouTube would like to listen to the podcast, it will be over there. So final words, Jaymie, before we finish today.
Yeah, well, thanks for having me on firstly, and congratulations as well on the series coming out today. I'm sure it's going to go down really well. It covers a lot of topics that's very vital for people to understand. That higher spiritual level, it's all very, very good and well to know what's going on in the world in the five senses, but the solutions are out there. So it's very important that we kind of take that one step further.
Sorry, Jaymie.
That's all right. That's all right. Yeah, that's just as I was saying that. That was the whole point of putting together a channel that's got such a diversity of content. You can find out what's going on in the world and also then take that knowledge and put it into other areas of your life, like the spiritual stuff that we have, the health stuff that we have, the fitness stuff that we have, and actually have tangible things you can go away and do, rather than just, here's some information, the world's really dark, and that's it. It's, here's some information, but here's what you can do about it, and here's what you can do yourself to take back power of your own life, which is where it all begins.
Absolutely. Beautiful. Well done. Thank you again. And we'll hopefully have you back another time.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.